I have been trying to understand Cap.money for a while now, and I was lucky enough to get on a call with DeFi Dave and Benjamin from the Cap team, and they walked me through everything. I asked them 1,000 questions. I'm probably still going to get some things a little bit mudded up here, but I understand it enough to give you guys at least a basic understanding of what's going on and how this is dramatically different from most new stablecoin protocols. So yes, it is a stablecoin protocol, and yes, they are a dime a dozen. There are so many stablecoin protocols out there. So the question you should be asking is Cap doing something dramatically unique? Are they filling a void that nothing else is filling? Are they addressing a market that no one else is addressing? And the answer is yes. And that is what's so cool about Cap. So I'm just going to jump right into it. Cool front edge, cool splash page. I've actually used this as a suggestion of how I should do my own protocol. Anyways, if you click launch app, then you go right into the app and you can see immediately that you can mint CUSD 1-to-1 for USDC. So right off the bat, I'm happy because that is my preferred mechanism, is instead of going through liquidity, going through swapping, which I understand why teams do that, it just mints 1-to-1 the synthetic stable or synthetic dollar of the protocol. So 1-to-1 minting is awesome for CUSD. And then if you want to get STC USD, you just turn this into CUSD, turn this into STC USD, and then you can mint at NAV. So it's not swapping, you're not losing anything here. You're just getting the actual staked asset, because you're just staking the asset, right? That's just what's happening. And so you'll notice an APR up here, 7.76%. And so the question is, like, what is Cap doing to provide a yield to end users? And again, is it filling a niche that no one else is filling? And is the mechanism compelling enough that the valuation of the protocol should be relatively high? Because really what we're all doing is we're farming airdrops, right? You know, we want the caps, we want the points. We want to know that Cap has a future and that it's like filling a niche that no one else is. So if you go to overview, what you're going to notice here is delegators, operators, and protocol health. Probably some confusing terms if you're used to stablecoin protocols. You probably haven't ever seen those before. So protocol health is just an analytics page. We'll look at that in a bit. But first, I want to look at delegators and operators. Now, you may be familiar with these from restaking. And if you were thinking restaking when you saw these, you are exactly right. Cap is technically an AVS. Blew my mind when I heard that, because I thought AVSs were useless and did nothing, except for maybe, what's that, eOracle? You know, because I guess they're doing oracles. But basically, if you go to delegators, right, what you're going to see is a bunch of names you've seen before: Stakestone, Hyperrhythm, MEV, Concrete, Renzo, RE7, EtherFi, right? And some delegations. Now, the best way to think about this is that these delegations are collateral. The very interesting thing here is that it's collateral for other people's loans. Now, we're going to explain that in a bit. Basically, the delegators are posting collateral for uncollateralized borrowers to borrow against in return for a yield. And so the uncollateralized borrowers effectively have to be very, very high trust institutions, and they are. And so we're going to look at them next. They're the operators. So you can see here, Stakestone is providing wrap staked ETH, Hyperrhythm's providing Bitcoin, wrap staked ETH, and Lombard BTC, MEV Capital, STETH. And so the benefit to them is that they have all this STETH, they have all this Bitcoin, they have all this restaked capital that they want to participate in, not only restaking, but also in the additional yield of Cap. So Cap is like the first AVS to actually give yield back to restakers. And this is how. So if you go to overview and then go to operators, what you'll see here is a list of different teams. Now, some of them are overlap. So some teams are both delegating and operating. So on the delegating side, they're sourcing liquidity, they're posting it as collateral. And then on the borrower side, the team itself may be taking an uncollateralized loan out at a specific interest rate. However, that's not like the main goal, I'd say. I mean, it's definitely a use case here, but the more interesting use case, in my opinion, is like strategy teams, Pareto, RE7, who can take out these uncollateralized loans by making these agreements with the delegator and paying the effective uncollateralized loan rate to do that. So right now, I think it's around 4 to 5% to borrow. The operators pay that 4 to 5% plus the restaker rate. So the restaker rate is an additional fee or additional rate they pay on top of the borrow cost. This rate goes to the delegator. So the delegators aren't just getting, Lombard yield or Lombard points. They're not just getting wrap staked ETH yield or whatever additional benefits they get from restaking. They're also getting 4%, 3.5%, 1% on top of that, which really puts that restaked capital to use, getting substantially more yield because there's so much capital in Eigen and synthetic that just being able to get any more yield on that really can push the needle. So That's pretty cool. So again, the operators are the uncollateralized borrowers. Operators do not need to post any collateral to borrow assets. Now you might say, well, how can they do that? Well, one, again, they're very robust teams and institutions, and you might also be thinking, well, doesn't that create a risk vector for lenders? And the answer is no. And the reason why is because, again, all of these loans are over collateralized by the delegator. The delegator is posting collateral. The operator is borrowing against that collateral. And the lender is us, like the DeFi users, us who are bringing in USDC and then really minting CUSD. So we bring in USDC, we mint CUSD. We have now effectively lent USDC to the protocol, and they can lend that out to the operators, right? And so we're getting the lending rate. And of course, we're getting a boosted exposure to that by the same mechanism that everyone loves and knows, which is CUSD is non-yield bearing. It's mostly for the points. Of course, it can be used in other DeFi things and Pendle and this and that, but it gets none of the yield. So all of the yield then is sort of leveraged to the STC USD users who are getting a 7.76% return, even though probably the average lend rate is around, or the average borrow cost is somewhere around 4 or 5%. And we can actually check this out. So if we go over to overview and then protocol health, which I told you we would do, you can come down here. You can see the TVL, you can see the APY here. So there have been some days where it's been up to 11%, but the average has been around, I'd say 7 to 8%. Right now, weekly average is 7%. Pretty good base rate for a lending protocol, especially one that's giving you points. So I'm pretty happy about that. But if you go down to borrowed versus delegated, you can see that the delegators are far outweighing the borrowed, which means that things are highly over collateralized. So you're in a really good place if you're a lender, getting that 7 to 8% plus caps or points. And then you can see how many CUSDs in circulation. But really what you're looking for is, and you can also see the delegations, again, collateral by assets. So the collateral assets are mostly wrap staked ETH, Lombard, BTC, and then a little bit of wrap BTC, but mostly wrap staked ETH. Now, I'm looking for the borrow cost, which is somewhere around here. Is it in view asset? Here we go. That's what I was looking for. So if you go here, borrow APY, the borrow APY is around 5 to 6%. So this is the cost that the operators are paying on top of that additional rate. So they're paying 6% plus whatever the average restaker rate is. So maybe 6% plus 4%, they're paying a net of 10%. Remember though, you might say, well, why not borrow on Aave? Because on Aave, you have to be over collateralized. You can come as an institution onto CAP and borrow uncollateralized. Now you have to make an agreement with the delegator. Those agreements are actual legal agreements, legally binding documents, which behold you to whatever the terms of the loans are, this, that, and the other thing. Interestingly, the agreement also sets the LTV, but the LLTV is set by the protocol. So what am I getting at? What is the point of all of this? Because really for us as yield farmers, all we want to know is like probably point speculation. What's the value there? When airdrop? What's the deal with season 3? What is the real yield? Where is it coming from? But in my opinion, the other thing we should be highly aware of is there PMF for this? Is there a market for this? Is this unique? And the unique answer is obviously, right? This is definitely unique. No one else is doing this. No one else is doing undercollateralized loans using uncollateralized loans using eigenlayer or restaking, right? So that's really cool. The other thing is there a market for it? I think absolutely. I see RE7 here, but I also imagine we'll see people like Stakehouse, like MEV, like Edge Capital, like Tulipa. I mean, there's any number of these guys, right? And so all of these teams that are doing these on-chain strategies, are running these on-chain, I won't call them hedge funds, but on-chain strategies, they could tap into this, pay a rate of 10% with incredible capital efficiency because there's no collateralization here, and then go and farm that at a higher rate. And many of these teams are able to get a higher than 10% rate. So I think that's definitely a good PMF. And I think that once teams realize they can do this and realize how much collateral is available to borrow against and work directly with teams like EtherFi, who can provide a lot, or Concrete or Hyperrhythm or whoever it is, right, providing the collateral, then things can really take off. So that's the narrative that I'm interested in. And of course, the narrative is going to be related in some meaningful sense to the FTV when the airdrop happens. But for us, right, what are we looking at? We're looking at caps. So caps, we're in epoch 3. What does that mean? We're in the final epoch of this season. I've estimated around probably a target of 150 billion total caps by the end of season 3. And if my math is correct on that, I think it could be a reasonably good airdrop. Now, I don't know if I've done this math publicly. I've definitely done it privately in the dojo. But happy to have you guys audit my math here. Let me see if I can find that math. The odds of me finding it really fast are low, but I'm going to try because I did a calculator for it. Let's go to recent, and it's a spreadsheet copy of, yes. All right, so the Pendle intern did all of this crazy math, which, shout out to him for doing all that. I just made it way more simple. So what I've done is I have, taken the total points that I think. So right now we're like 92, 93 billion. And then season 3 ends, I think, in a couple months. Maybe it's December or maybe it's January. I can't exactly remember. This was the TVL last I checked. Now I am assuming an FDB to TVL ratio of 0.5, which means that the FDB is typically about half of the TVL at launch. This is a pretty common ratio. I think that that's reasonable. Of course, you can go up or down depending on how unique you think CAP is going to be. And the airdrop percentage, this is just the average season 1 airdrop. They haven't said anything. I haven't got any alpha on this. I'm just taking the boilerplate. 5% is typically the minimum. Sometimes it goes up to 10%. 10% would be a massive, humongous airdrop. I don't think we're going to get 10%. I think 5% is a lot more reasonable. And then, of course, airdrop size is just 5% times the FDV. In this case, the FDV would be 185, $170 million given the 1-to-2 ratio. So that gives us a point value of 0.000056. With that point value, we can then extrapolate the yield. So at 1 cap per dollar per day, that would be just this number times 365 as the base rate. So the base rate point APR is 2%, right? Now, if you're doing the YTs on Pendle, as an example, you're getting 20x that. So 20 times 2% is a 41% IY. And again, this is just using these numbers, right? Change my math however you want. Correct me where you think I'm wrong. These are the numbers that I'm using. And that would put the IY at 41%. If we go into Pendle and look at the CAP markets, I'm seeing CUSD at 11%, which may indicate that it's undervalued. I'm not going to say that it is because, of course, this is my math. So I think my math is pretty robust. In order for this to be fairly valued, we would effectively need to see, I don't even know, like a 0.2 ratio. I mean, even that's overvalued. A 0.1? No, like a 0.12, which means that the FDB would have to be 40 million, which I think is crazy low for CAP. So I do think there's a good chance these YTs are undervalued, but there's also a chance my math is wrong. So please audit my math, do your own math, see if you agree or disagree. There's a Dune dashboard. Dune has blocked me. I have no idea why. I don't even know how you can use Dune maliciously, but they won't let my browsers on any of my browsers use Dune from this computer. So I don't know what I did to make them mad. Dune, if you ever see this, please let me use your platform again. Dune has a good dashboard for CAP where you can see the total current points. And that's sort of how I extrapolated what I think the total points will be by the end of Epoch 3. So that's where I'm getting that 150 billion from. TVL, I'm just drawing that right from there. And then, of course, FDV TVL ratio. This is the most speculative thing. This is kind of like what you have to decide you think is reasonable. Again, 0.3 to 0.5 is typically like a very good solid estimate. I'm using 0.5 here. And then airdrop percentage. This is also speculative, but really, I mean, 5% is kind of the industry standard. Are they going to do that? I don't know. I have no idea. It's just kind of a boilerplate number. So given that, fairly confident that all my other math is correct. And I have confirmed multiple times over that the way the caps work is it's 1 cap per day per dollar as the base rate, and all the multipliers are based off of that. So a 20x multiplier just means 20 caps per day per dollar, which again is getting us to a 41% IY on CUSD. So I think that's pretty good. Go check out CAP. And if you want to, of course, leverage your exposure to these things, you certainly can. You can buy the PTs and you can leverage those on Morpho. There's not an insane amount of liquidity for CUSD, actually STCUSD. I wonder how many caps that's getting. So that's effectively a net zero base rate. Like you're borrowing at effectively the same cost as your yield is. So you're not going to get any real organic yield. But if STC USD, for example, got a meaningful multiplier, it could be worth leveraging up. And then, of course, like STC USD, that is, I think it's getting 10%. So here you can do 10x leverage. So it's going to be around 17% net APR, but you're giving up the points. And in my opinion, I kind of want the points here, at least for this. Sometimes I think the points are overvalued. I'm not going to name any stablecoin protocols where I think that's the case, but in some cases I think points are undervalued, and that's just based off my math. So I try to do bearish math to see if even in the most bearish scenario, would the point still be undervalued? And this may be one of those cases. So anyways, that is it. Hopefully you understand cap better in this circumstance. As a reminder, as a lender, you're not on the line for these liquidations. The way liquidations happen are just the same way. You have decentralized liquidators will come in to liquidate the collateral assets to pay back the loans to make sure that everything is always over collateralized. And so lenders are really not exposed to any of this under collateralized or uncollateralized borrowing by the operators. And again, it's all through actual legally binding agreements between highly trusted institutions and delegators who just want that additional yield on their restaked capital. So thank you guys so much for watching. Shout out to DeFi Dave and Benjamin for walking me through all this. And again, if I missed anything or got anything wrong, please let me know in the comments down below. If you have any questions, also let me know. I will answer them to the best of my ability. Anything I can't answer, I will tag DeFi Dave and have him, earn his keep. So thanks for watching and have a wonderful rest of your